You know, your body does thousands of different things all day long. Thousands of different things. But when it comes to the really big jobs, it likes to do one or the other, okay? I was once driving up to teach my university students in London, and they diverted us off the main motorway into the outback. Can you imagine outback in England? I mean, it makes it sound like Australia, but it was sort of green and not many signposts. We're very famous for that. I went into this sort of very strange wonderland of no signpost in my car, and I thought I must call up my head of department, tell him to go and explain to my students what they need to be getting on with. And I was thinking of pulling a map out of my glove compartment, and in the UK, yes, it is on this side, the steering wheel is on this side. And I was eating a banana, I have to confess at the time. What I actually did, and this is a true story, is that I spoke to my head of department, or attempted to, in the banana. I bit onto the phone, and I hit the car in front. Cost me about $700 worth of damage. No, more than that, $1,000 worth of damage. I can do several things at one time. I mean, I'm breathing here, and I'm walking up and down, and I'm moving, and I'm talking, and I'm thinking, and I'm holding this. But ask me to do several big jobs, and I'm challenged. It's the same with your body. It cannot conduct emotions, which is a massive job, and digest a pile of toxic, deranged, messed up, heated food. It can't do both. So that feeling of satisfaction that we usually get at an end of a meal is actually emotional numbness. We go, that's it. I'm satisfied now. I can't feel a darn thing. Now, the point is, when you embrace a raw diet, what you need to do is you need to seek out a different feeling at the end of a meal. At the end of the meal, you feel a lightness of being. You feel as if somebody asked you to get up and dance. You just say, yeah, sure. You have a feeling that you are directly connected to your emotions at all times. This is the number one reason why people can't stay on the raw path. It's not because of the food, it's because of the emotions. They just can't handle it. And as Art was saying, they've been stuffing it down and suppressing it all those years. Just a mere glimpse of what's down there is really scary. If you want to succeed on the raw food path, you need to learn to embrace, love, and non-judgmentally experience and integrate your own emotions. It's the only way forwards if raw health is what you're really after. Another thing that I find people very much tend to have a challenge with is that they just do not consume enough fruit in their diets. They try to live off vegetables and nuts. The point is, and I know that this is going to be touched on many times today, that your body needs a large proportion, about 75–80% of your total calories in a day to consist of carbohydrates. If you are not getting them through fruit, assuming that you're not suckling at breast, we won't pursue that line. What you do is you'll end up being driven towards the cooked foods and the starches. You've got to get those carbohydrates from somewhere. You cannot get them from your nuts and your avocados and your lettuce. You must eat enough fruit. And finally, the third reason why I find people aren't able to stay on the raw path is because the need to be approved of by their family, friends, peers, work colleagues is actually greater than their desire to experience health. And they compromise their own authenticness in order to gain that approval. Well, I suggest the way forward with that one is to realize that the only person's approval that you need of in your life is your own. And be proud of your differences. Be proud of them. I've learned to be proud of mine. And in fact, when I sit down at someone's house and I'm just sitting eating a big plate of strawberries or whatever it might be, I actually delight in the fact that I'm different from other people. Not from a perspective of arrogance, but in that uniqueness I realize lies my potential. Because as much as we're all a great oneness, we are also individual, absolutely unique beings. And I encourage you to explore your unique potential and celebrate it. And enjoy your raw food. Thank you. We're going to do questions later. Do you want to bring it up then, just because of the time? I did see you there.
So now you know what to tell them. Well, you could give that back. She's worth coming to hear again and again. Thank you, Rosie. We're going to take a short break, set up for a food demo, because it's not all about food. And maybe that's what we should have called it. Perfectly good food and change it into something that's no longer perfectly good. So to keep the, obviously at some point I had to control the numbers, because otherwise I would have been feeding my entire town. And so what I started doing was charging people to come to these food demos and making it more organized and doing things to make it interesting, you know. If you juggle enough vegetables, you end up with tossed salad. Anyway, it developed into a program that I called Simply Delicious. Because the idea, hi, how are you?
Do you want me up here?
Yeah, I'd love to have you up here. That's good. Would you like the mic?
Okay.
Because it sounds better with you. But I'll
Your
take
shout.
it out of my pocket.
Okay.
And the Simply Delicious program was one where what I was trying to show people was it's not about how much you do with the food. In fact, in many cases, how little you do with the food works better than how much. And where my dear friend Giuliano has made an art form of creating complicated recipes, I've gone the other way to see how simply can I create something that is still a recipe, which poses plenty of challenges. Over the years, that's gotten easier and easier to do, and my own dietary preferences have gotten simpler. And the Simply Delicious program developed into a full 10-week course. And each week would do different things, sometimes doing dressings, and sometimes sauces and dips and spreads, and sometimes fondues, and sometimes salads, and just desserts, and sometimes soup, and hors d'oeuvres, and whatever it was going to be. And I learned more stuff about food, and Simply Delicious eventually got a reputation. It went on the road at the gourmet Jamaica festival, where the gourmets of the world were featured. I got to give a food demo while everybody else needed a week to make their meals. They asked me, what are you going to need for ingredients? And I just said, well, I'll use whatever's left over.
A cutting board.
That would be a cutting board?
A cutting board.
I don't know if we have cutting boards. Should we use ours?
Yeah, but let's use one and we can demo.
Yeah, let's use ours. Thank you. So, eventually, as I said,
It's like Monty Python.
It's funny because I talk about eating as simply as possible, and what are you doing there, Ross?
Opening up a pack of chopping boards. Have you ever seen these? Anyone ever seen? They are wonderful. I mean, my life was transformed when I discovered these. They're great. One of the wonderful things I really like about these chopping boards is that, you know, sometimes when you chop stuff up and you want to transfer it to the bowl, and you kind of go, and then you go, it's all on the floor, okay? With this one, you can just curl it into like a funnel and just tip it straight in the bowl. Plus the fact they really seem to be good at not blunting knives. Knives seem to stay real sharp a long time when you use these. They're light, they're quick to rinse, and, you know, I do think it's, they fit in the sink to clean too, because you can bend them however small your sink. I do think it's really important that if you are trying to make a transition to raw, that you support yourself in your kitchen as best as you possibly can in that endeavor. And what I mean by that is that you set your kitchen up as a raw food kitchen as best as you can. Now, I do appreciate that some of you no doubt share your home with other people who do not share your interest or passion in raw food, but at least you can make things as supportive of yourself as you possibly can. These chopping boards, I think, are a great start. They're nice and large, and they're so easy to handle, and so on and so forth. But the other thing I think is really important is to make sure that you have sharp knives. You know, when you're dealing with produce, there's nothing more frustrating than getting this like gorgeous ripe tomato and then going to slice into it and finding that all you've done is squashed it into this nasty mess on top of your lovely chopping board. So keeping your knives sharp is another really important thing to do. And having a good range of knives too. You know, serrated knives, straight edge knives, short knives, long knives, it all really helps. Keeping things out on your kitchen work surface, as opposed to, I know of a friend of mine who she's really trying to embrace the raw food diet, and her husband is absolutely adamant that this is ridiculous. And in order for her to use her blender, what she has to do is to ask him to go into the attic, where he brings it down and it's taken out of its polythene bag and its box, and she then uses it, and when she's finished he puts it back. Interesting family dynamics. Of course, if you are involved in that sort of scenario, it's very difficult for you to stay on the path. But if it's right there in front of you in the kitchen, ready to go, it's going to make all the difference. What are you doing there now, Doug?
I'm opening a box of strawberries.
With intention too.
Oh, what we're going to do is make a bunch of different dressings, primarily. It's funny because as I said, I talk about the 5-5-5 rule. You guys know the 5-5-5 rule? It's a way of keeping track of, actually, I think Robert might have been the first one to talk to me about the 5-5-5 rule. If you have more than 5 ingredients, it took you more than $5 to make it, or more than 5 minutes, you need to work on it. You might have to start with 666 and work it down, but the goal would be eventually to get to 1-1-1. You could just have a really simple meal. Most of my meals at this point are extremely simple. I'll just take one piece of, or one type of food, and just make a meal of that. But it's funny because that's what kids do automatically, and if you give them 3 things on a plate, they'll eat all of one thing before they ever go to the next thing anyway. Can't I just have the whatever one thing they like? They would rather make a meal of that, and it's a natural thing for us. In fact, all creatures in the wild eat one food at a time when they're hungry till they're full. So it's not some profound insight on our part to suggest the same thing. You just have to have your eyes open. And so people say, you mean you just eat lettuce and make a meal of lettuce? Well, I've done that. And in airports it gets kind of a funny look. But at private too, there are times when just eating lettuce certainly will make a meal. Yes, it takes a lot of lettuce. And no, it's not as exciting as a salad. So when you're thinking about it, it's not as exciting in advance. Afterwards, the only thing that matters is, did you get enough? And so in that case, yes, it's easy to meet up. But for most of us, when we eat vegetables don't get the same respect that fruit gets, where you just eat fruit by itself. With vegetables, we tend to make salad and mix it all together. And once we've mixed it all together, although I know you could very happily eat a plain cucumber or a plain stalk of celery, by the time you chop them and mix them all together, you always want to put a dressing on them. And so we've come up with a way of making dressings that are easy and quick, environmentally satisfying to most people's requirements, and overall user-friendly, if you will. But basically, there's 2 ingredients in a dressing. Actually, you go ahead. I'm just doing a little bit of prep that's required.
Okay. When we look at a dressing, the classic dressing is mixing a fat with an acid. And classically, that might be vinegar and sunflower oil, for example. Now, that obviously, as we're learning today, is a pretty unhelpful combination at the best. But we can mimic that by just using fresh produce, by using an acid fruit as the acid part of the dressing. And when we say an acid fruit, we're looking at the whole of the range of citrus fruits. We're looking at most of the berries, such as strawberries and so forth, looking at pineapples, any of these more acidy fruits. To really get a basic, simple understanding of what an acid fruit is, imagine you had a little cut on the side of your mouth. If eating that fruit would make you go, "Oh," for a moment, then it's an acid fruit, okay? Those kind of acid fruits thrown into the blender, along with a fat in terms of either an avocado or a raw nut or a raw seed, and you've got that acid and fat combination that makes the ideal dressing. And I have to say that, in my humble opinion, I think Doug is the master of delicious salad dressings. He really has got it off to an art form. And I have a couple of favorites that I keep reproducing, you know, with incredible monotony. But once I find something I like, personally, I feel no particular desire to find something else. I found mangoes, and that basically did it for me. But when it comes to this dressing, you know, sometimes you need to make the dressing a bit more in quantity. And you can do things, and Doug's going to show you ways of doing that in this little demonstration here. For example, you might have put your acid fruit, you might have put your fat in the blender and you blended it up, but it just doesn't seem to be enough to make yourself the kind of goopy salad you really want. So you could simply throw in some other vegetables, such as celery, for example, which will voluminize the whole thing and make it in greater quantity. When, of course, you're doing all this stuff, and mentioning again, going back to being supportive to yourself in your kitchen, I do advocate that you have a good supply of cloths, both wet and dry, available in your kitchen. You do tend to get stuff on your hands, and if you're me, anywhere as far as the back of your ears when you're preparing these kind of foods. And, you know, by the time you've touched the cupboard and you've touched this and you've touched that, you haven't got a cloth, it all turns into a bit of a mess. So have those cloths nearby and handy. Also, I do think it's useful to rinse things as you go along. You know, if you rinse things immediately, it comes away almost instantaneously. If you leave things hanging around in the kitchen and come back after your meal, it's a little bit more effort to get cleanup done. Doug knows that my particular personal pet hate is cleaning machines like blenders and food processors, where the food, you know, it gets down in those little places. And there's something about that that really gets to me. I don't enjoy that task of cleaning them up. And a lot of people find with blenders, you know, when the blender's used, you look at the thing and you think, oh, now I've got to clean this out inside, and this is a big nuisance. If you simply put some water in the blender and turn the thing on after you've used it, it cleans itself. It's a really quick way of doing it. So Doug's throwing down here some cherry tomatoes, which look rather marvelous. This is going to form the acid part of this dressing. Remember, tomatoes are essentially a fruit, and they're an acid one at that. And then there's going to be some kind of fat added here, which looks like it's going to be, who knows?
We were driving over here this morning, and we saw these little hedgehog critters on the side of the road. One of them was sitting up like a little sentinel, and a couple of them were laying very still in the middle of the road resting, and the rest were scurrying about quite a bit, and this isn't one of them. But everybody knows what this fruit is, yes? Okay, this is a durian. For the durian aficionados, this is a durian. It grows in Southeast Asia primarily, so it leaves quite a skid mark across the planet to bring them from there to here. Yet they are so delicious that there's something close to 1 million tons being exported a year from Thailand, let alone the other countries that are growing it. It is remarkably one of the most delicious fruits on the planet, and to balance that out, it also has a unique aroma that some people find, well, we'll call it distinctive.
Objectionable.
Some people say it's reminiscent of the smell that's added to natural gas. Excuse me. I guess the best description I've heard of it is custard-like. It's very reminiscent to me of flan, if you ever had flan. The poets kind of say it's like eating the best vanilla custard you've ever had in a sewer. Or the taste taste of heaven, but the smell of hell. It's a rather delicious fruit, and the funny thing is I usually see people attacking it with a chainsaw or something of its equivalent. People have died when these things fall out of the trees. The points are rather sharp, but when they are ripe, they're actually exceptionally easy to open. There's 5 compartments, and each compartment has a segment line so that you can just run your finger down the line, which is tons of fun, and open it to end up with durian. We don't have a garbage can. If we did, that would be who knows? And so this is durian, and we only have a bit actually in the fruit, but we have a bunch for anybody and everybody who wants to taste it that has come out of the fruit, been processed, frozen, sent to us, and so everybody can get a taste. Granted, by far and away, the best durian is the fresh durian. Second best is something like this that was frozen and brought over here as a whole piece of fruit. But out of a 7-pound durian, you're probably looking at about 5.5 pounds weighing as shell. So environmentally, shipping it over the other way makes a lot more sense. And anybody who hasn't tried it, please know that there's going to be tastes available later in the day of this marvelous Southeast Asian fruit, which when Rozzy and I ate it in Atlanta airport, we actually, because someone smelled natural gas, we actually shut down Atlanta airport. Which didn't really serve our purposes because we were trying to leave Atlanta airport on a plane, and we didn't get to go. Well, we did, but it was much later.
Dr. Graham, does the smell come from sulfur that's
Yeah.
inside the durian?
Part of the smell's unique aroma is related to the fact that there's a bunch of free sulfur in the shell and in the fruit. It is an excellent sulfur source. I know that in some of the raw food circles, and you're not a plant, just in case anybody's wondering, but in some of the raw food circles, there are people actually selling you pharmaceutical quality sulfur, which is not the way our body utilizes it anyway, but the fresh available, bioavailable sulfur is readily available, actually in most dark green leafy vegetables, but certainly in this marvelous fruit as well.
Can anyone smell it yet? Just.
Actually, the funny thing is, once you're around it for a while, you don't smell it. What was that part of your brain called, Ken? Yeah. The reticular activating mechanism of the brain stops you from noticing things after a while. So at this point, I honestly can't even pick up aroma. Can you?
Mildly.
But it's
Very
but
mild.
you guys probably are getting it. It'll keep coming out. We'll open up the rest of it and people can taste. Back to dressings. I was promised an industrial blender. An industrial blender works well. I like the Vitamix. I sell the Vitamix. I sell the knife sharpener and the cutting boards because I like to have the tools, and I think that you don't need to be frustrated by the mechanical aspects of making your kitchen work for you. Anytime I can just eat food by just opening it and eating it, all the better. I used to have one of these. I like these. We'll see if we can make dressings with this, but we can't make like big quantities, that's for sure. And so I'm apologizing in advance, I guess, just in case. There's a couple different ways to go with dressings. One is to know that some nuts are inherently less bitter, even more sweet than other nuts. And some acid fruits are more sweet than other acid fruits. So a tangerine is way more sweet than a grapefruit. A cashew is way more sweet than a sunflower seed. If you start with cashew and orange, you're going to end up with a much sweeter dressing than if you start with sunflower seed and grapefruit. But you can mix and match. What do you call it? Benetons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can they do that?
Mix and match the colours, yeah.
Yes. Nobody knows what you're talking about in this country when you say that.
You don't have it here?
Yes, we have Benetons. We don't do that mix and match thing though, right? Girls? I don't know anyway. in any case, you can mix and match, and you can come up with, starting with about 15 options of fat sources, and equally as many, probably about 25 different acid sources. You have an endless array of acid and fat combinations. So let's do one and see what happens. If we start with tomato and pine nut, I'm not sure what's going to happen. We may have to do a little bit of technique with this blender. Oh, it works! Yay! When you go to make dressings, everybody has this experience, at least once or 100 times in my case. You put the nuts in, and then you start adding the acid fruit, and even if your blender can handle the nuts, which you then find out it couldn't, you needed more liquid than that, you add the tomatoes or whatever it is, and then it ends up too runny, and so then you add more nuts, and then you add more tomatoes, and then you add more nuts, and then you add more tomatoes, and you end up with a meal of dressing, which isn't all that bad, but it wasn't what you intended in the first place. Or, worse still, you put in the tomatoes that you wanted, and then you go to add the nuts, and it's not enough, but that's all you had in the house, and so now you got this runny thing that you wouldn't have wanted to put. There are a couple ways to beat that. One of them is to put the nuts in first, but you got to know your blender can handle it. So it may not. But that way you can say, this is how much nuts I want to use. And then you add your acid fruit until it's the consistency that you want. If you do it the other way, the only thing I can tell you is like picking out a good durian. I mean, you go to the store and you go, how do you pick out a good durian? The answer is, by the time you pick out 10 or 12 bad ones, you stop picking out bad ones. So experience is a marvelous teacher. And in this case, I just have an idea of about how much tomato for how much of this. And I'll put in a little bit more tomato when I'm all done here. So we got it watery. We add some nuts. The option is, do you want it grainy or do you want it creamy? And all it is how long you leave the blender on. Oh, and it made dressing. Me too. I'm really like not that big on cleanup, so I just use the easy quickie method. That's clean enough for our purposes. Okay. So I'm going to make a couple more. Rosie's got some marvelous insights, and go to it.
Okay, I'm just going to stand actually as far away from the blender as I can so that you don't get the blender down the microphone here. I do appreciate there's many of you, as I mentioned earlier, who do live in a living environment where not everyone is trying to do what you're trying to do. And I'm sure there's those of you among us too who perhaps are challenged with bringing up children who are not doing necessarily what you'd like to see them do. One word of advice is do not use meal times to discuss this. Okay? I've seen this time and time again, that the meal table becomes a battleground. And that is the time when all the distresses and the resentments and the frustrations all build up. It is not conducive to good digestion and consequently not good for health. I suggest that you keep these issues well away from the feeding table at all times. When it comes to children, you know, children very much respond to being involved in processes rather than being delivered with the final result. Yeah? And I encourage you to invite children to participate in the preparation of meals. Even allow them to be involved in the shopping processes. Let them pick out the tomatoes they think they look the best, even if you're thinking, that's completely unripe and it looks really mangled. Let them pick it. It was their choice. Obviously, the quality of ingredients is going to result in a quality taste and a quality meal, but at the same time, that child is going to feel really valued and important in the food preparation process. And also, if they're invited to make things that, you know, their own design, to come up with simple recipes, participate in creating the meal, they are going to sit down, and I guarantee that even if it tastes absolutely foul, that child will sit and eat the whole thing out of principle because they made it and they're proud of it. So invite children to become involved in the process. Obviously, and I don't want to sound like someone's grandmother, but we do need to be careful with really sharp knives with children. I have
is that
seen.
what happened?
That was what happened, yeah. I have seen a couple of instances where it's been a nasty scenario. Child's been invited into the kitchen, but there just haven't been enough care around those sharp knives. They do need to be sharp to work with, but you don't want them around the kids. Another thing that I find really is he's going to make noise, but what's new? Well, we'll have a go. Let's put the blender on, and I'll natter, and you tell me if you can hear us.
In Texas, it's Tamarillo. In Colorado, it's Tamaria.
Okay, can you still hear me even over the top of the blender? Just about, kind of, okay. The other thing that you'll find when you're transitioning from the standard sort of salad dressings that you usually have to these kind of dressings is that you will be entering this domain with damaged taste buds. Yeah? When you've been assaulting your taste buds for years and years with strong condiments and salts and spices and flavorings and artificial substances, and you come to taste the more subtle flavors that you get from fruits and vegetables, you may initially think, well, wow, this doesn't really taste of anything. But I promise you that if you stick with it, gradually that delicacy of discerning different flavors will return to your taste buds. And that is such a joy. You will suddenly think, wow, this is what a strawberry really tastes like. Or, my goodness me, I didn't know almonds had this flavor. If during that transition you want to kind of wean yourself off the strong flavors by occasionally adding some herbs, such as perhaps cilantro or something along those lines, that can help you to satisfy that need for a strong flavor without too much of an insult on those taste buds. Okay, so what Doug's got in there now, or did have?
Tamarillo and Brazil nuts.
Okay.
This one's going to be strawberry and avocado.
Strawberry and avocado, and we had that the other night, and it is delicious.
It's little idiosyncrasies with the blender. If I put all the strawberries in and turn it on, there's nothing going to happen. They're going to lodge, so I'm going to turn it on first and kind of drop them in through the hole in the top that doesn't exist. This could be interesting.
Now, if you're lucky this afternoon, you might actually get to see the unique Doug Graham technique of blender assistance. What this actually consists of is lifting up the entire machine, base and all, and shaking it if it won't go down. Not recommended at home.
Do not stick your hand in the blender.
Celery has so many uses, it's amazing. Of course, with your avocados, you are going to get a different flavor according to the type of avocado that you use. The difference, of course, between the big, more succulent Florida avocados and the smaller husk varieties. That looked like to be one of those more nuttier, smaller types of avocados, and that's the kind of taste you're going to get from that. Of course, one of the delights is that if you like to have a little bit of fruit before you sit down and have your vegetable meal in the evening, to save extra prep and extra cleanup, you simply take whatever acid fruit it is that you're making the dressing out of and just enjoy that in its wholeness as a sort of pre-dinner fruit meal, and then use the same fruit through into the dressing. It also, of course, simplifies your food combining, keeps your diet really nice and simple, easy to digest that way.
We have a name for this technique. It's called gush.
Gush. Now you know where he gets all his muscles from. It's squeezing oranges.
And a two-hand gush.
You don't consider herbs raw?
No, I certainly consider them raw. I just consider, let me put it this way. I like to simplify things. And when it comes to what I consider to be a natural part of my diet and what isn't, I ask myself two questions. Question one is, would I find this item in my natural environment, which is the tropical, subtropical rainforest or forest of the world? The second question, if the answer to the first question is yes, the second question is, if I did find it, would I choose to make a meal of it in and of itself? Now, the chances are that if I'm standing there and there's like a tree dripping in ripe mangoes, and there's a load of pineapples over here, and there's a load of bananas over there, and then there's some cilantro growing, what am I going to choose to make a meal of? I very much doubt it's going to be the cilantro, yeah? So I like to keep those simple rules in mind when I'm thinking what would be the very most natural thing for me to enjoy. Also bear in mind that when you consume herbs and the such like which have very strong flavors, that it can become a situation that leads to overeating. When the flavor is very powerful, it's very stimulating on the body and therefore can trigger continual consumption after hunger's actually been satisfied. This dressing is?
We made more of it by adding a cucumber to the walnut and orange gush.
Walnut and orange gush, volumized by extra celery.
Cucumber.
Oh, sorry, by cucumber, yeah.
So by adding a bunch more cucumber, we made more out of the dressing. Also, if you want this to turn totally liquidy, some of the harder nuts, either soak them in water for a while first, or as I say, just walk away from your blender for a minute. Come back a minute later. It's a technique I learned from a good friend of mine, Wayne Pickering. He calls it turn on the blender and walk away for a minute. Hey, let the blender do what it does. There's nothing wrong with that.
Anyone who wants to, you will have an opportunity to try these dressings. I mean,
Yeah,
we'll leave them, you know, well, lunch is coming, and you can kind of dip in and experiment with them and see what you enjoy. Did we bring the wastebasket?
No, the wastebasket is the recycling bucket. It's the aluminum can recycling bucket, which I took him back and washed real nice and then filled with water.
Okay, we're back to the cherry tomatoes on this occasion, and red pepper. You know, colours, again, are things which, going back to children, very much appeal to children. If they see bright, vibrant colours, it's very attractive to them. And so using things that contrast beautifully, such as the reds and the greens, can really entice children, whereas if it's pretty much the same kind of colour, they may not be as interested. So we've got sunflower seeds going in here with the tomatoes. Did you put something else in there too? Okay, this is just tomato and sunflower.
Pepper.
And the red pepper, yeah. When it comes to dressings, it is always best to make them fresh on a daily basis, I mean on a mealtime basis. We don't advocate like making up a load of dressings like this and just putting like cling wrap over the top and leaving them in the fridge and saying, that's my dinners for a week. Nutritionally, you're not going to be doing yourselves a favor, and in fact, taste-wise, you'll find you're not enjoying it as much either. And as you can see, they're so quick to make, there really is no need to make them in advance.
So at dinner time, Rosie makes the salad, I make the dressing, works out just nice.
Yeah, it's teamwork. What I would suggest too is I know many of you, go out to work and you take a packed meal with you, and sometimes it's a challenge to know what to take. Personally, myself and I know Doug, in most cases, will just recommend that you take fresh fruit with you. It's just real easy to carry, real easy to take. Some people we know, however, are going to be eating dinner at work as well because they stay that late. This is a pineapple. Doug's going to show you how to take the top off the pineapple in one simple move.
A lot of people are intimidated by the pineapple because it's got all them spiky things and they're difficult and they take up a lot of room, and all you do is hold one end. If you grab it from the bottom, the thorns won't ever get you. Grab it from the other end, it's all wrong. And take the pineapple in the other hand and just twist like you were twisting a doorknob, and then you're free. And then you can plant this side and you'll get another pineapple.
So if you're somebody who's actually wanting to take dinner to work with you and wanting to go down the salad route, simply by reducing the liquid content of the dressing and upping the either avocado, nut or seed content, you can make more of a dip. And then just cut up, or take with you some vegetables, things like cucumber, things that are really easy to just dip in that dip. And it can be a real easy way of taking food to work. Sometimes if you make a salad at home, that can work too, but don't dress the salad in the morning and then take it and expect to enjoy it in the evening. If you're going to do that, carry the dressing separately, because if it's been sitting in its dressing all day, you're going to have one limp salad by the end of the day. When we make salads...
Sounds like something you get at a Chinese restaurant. One limp salad.
One limb salad, yes. What have we got in there now? We've got
Pineapple.
just pineapple, and we're going to stick in...
Maybe.
The tastes that you end up with are very much dependent upon the original taste and quality of the food. celery, if you're going to use really bitter celery, don't expect it to come out anything other than a really bitter result, yeah? We are, personally, when we go into shops and we take celery, we usually just sneak a little piece off and taste it before we buy, and usually because we're buying in large quantities anyway. But if you've got bitter ingredients, you've got poor quality ingredients, ingredients that are going fermenting or moldy, you're not going to end up with a good result at the end of the day. Did you show them how to extract that pit there on the avocados,
Yep.
Doug? You did. I missed on that one, okay. Yeah, when it comes to salads, we tend to eat pretty simply for many reasons. If you take all the vegetables that you actually like and you go into the store and you get all the ones that you can get that you like and you always put them in your salad, every night you've got the same salad, right? Now, if on the other hand you limited yourself to a maximum of 3 different vegetables or 3 different ingredients, many of those vegetables are actually fruits such as cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers and so on. But if you limited yourself to 3 and maybe often just had one type of vegetable and you had all those different combinations of dressings, just think for 365 days of the year you would never have the same salad twice necessarily. To give you an example, we'll often take just celery and shred the whole lot up, just grate the whole lot up to make a slaw, make a dressing to go over the top, any one of the ones that Doug's just made here, mix it in, and it's a meal. And then the next night, maybe it's romaine lettuce and broccoli. And the next night, maybe it's cucumber, tomato. And throughout the week, you can have an enormous array of different salads.
Sorry. Do you need me to do more?
Do we need you to do more? Well, let's just have a recap on what we got here.
We've got red, white, green, pink,
Okay.
purple.
Actually, the purple one was interesting. That was, what was in that one?
That was tamarillo.
That was tamarillo, with...
A nice acid fruit. I like the passion fruit, the tomatoes, strawberries, all the citruses. Any of those make, really any acid fruit works well. Personally, for myself, I always prefer fatty fruits to nuts and seeds. A very small percentage of my total diet is nuts and seeds, although when I went raw at the beginning, a lot of it was nuts and seeds, granted, admittedly, which is one of the ways that I failed on the raw food diet time and time again. So now, the more I can go to avocado or other highly fat foods for my fat sources, I'm a happier camper. Everything works better than eating nuts and seeds, which, as you understand, in order for them not to go moldy, had to be dehydrated at some point or really dried in an oven for you, otherwise they would have gone moldy. They're not as fresh as you think.
What do you use instead of olives?
Well, there's a whole range of fatty fruits that are available. I don't tend to use those for dressings because fatty fruits come in 2 classifications: high fat, low sugar, like the avocado, or high sugar, low fat, like the durian. But it's still a fatty fruit. It's still in the close to 20% of the calories coming from fat, like ackee, breadfruit, jackfruit, durian. A lot of fruits are available. Okay, not everywhere, every day in your grocery store, but if you start looking for them, you can find them, just like we found these here. We didn't bring them with us.
Where did you find them?
These actually came from Denver, Catherine.
They came from actually Boulder, 28th Street.
They came from Boulder, close. We stopped recording past. Is there more you want to cover?
Not a tremendous amount, I didn't think.
Coconut's a great fatty source. Again, I tend to use coconut as a fruit when I eat it, like what you had today, the young coconuts, so that you can taste that it's sweet. And that at this point, it's a much higher sugar source than it is a fat source. It's again about 15 or 16% of the calories coming from fat. Although sometimes I'll still take that and put it in a salad dressing. But usually if I'm eating those lower fat fruits, and that's why I was making the distinction, I use them as my fat source, but I'm not necessarily having them with my salad. I'm just as happy to make a meal of this slightly fatty fruit and say, okay, I had a 17% fat meal, not take this, blend it up, add it to my salad, deal with that. It's too good to do that too. Yeah.
You ever eat olives?
I actually don't eat olives. Maybe once a year. They're in my what I would call my maybe category. Historically, olives have never been used as human food. Olives have a great place in human history. Olives have always been used as a source of fuel. As we know, people in the Middle East don't have a lot of jungles or forests. What they've got is a lot of desert, and so their homes tend to be made in caves. When I've toured through the Middle East, what I found out was that all the ancient people lived in caves, either completely underground or caves built into walls, but this is before electricity. They didn't have light. And so if they ate the olives, they still didn't have light. The olives were used, they were pressed. The remains of the olive, the fiber of the olive, was fed to livestock. The oil itself was used as fuel for their lanterns. It is not historically human food up until very, very recently. I don't think it's an ideal food, particularly eating olives. Most olives are inedible off the tree, and I don't tend to use those as a preferred source. Do you use them a lot still? No. Yeah, not at all.
This lady had a question.
Yeah, I don't think of it as a great fat. I mean, there's lots of fat sources, as you mentioned, poison ivy, belladonna, full of vitamins and minerals, but I wouldn't want to make a salad out of it. Yeah, yeah.
Sure, your question.
Yeah, what is wrong with vinegar? What is wrong with
Vinegar, if you buy acetic acid, for instance, where do you live? Local?
I live in Longmont.
Okay, go to Longmont High School. Go to the chemistry department, into the chemistry lab. They've got a bunch of chemicals there. One of the chemicals in a brown jug will be acetic acid. If you add 19 parts water to the 1 part acetic acid, you will have vinegar. It doesn't matter whether the acetic acid came from apple, in which case it's apple cider vinegar, or whether it came from pears, or whether it came from any fruit source. Each country makes their own specific type of acetic acid, but acetic acid is always in this little brown jug as pure acetic acid. It comes with a label that says acetic acid, and then underneath it in big, bold, red letters, block letters, it will say poison. Acetic acid is poison for humans. It turns your liver into stone, and it is not meant for human consumption. Now, you don't die from smoking the first cigarette, you only die a little, and you don't die from using a little vinegar, you only die a little. But it's not good for you under any circumstances, no matter how much you water it down. It's still not something we would want to ingest. In fact, it is a toxic byproduct of our own metabolism. It's something that we have to get rid of. To consume more of that is working against our own physiology. So we don't recommend that. Instead, we'll recommend that the acid we use is ascorbic acid, which is one that we can readily digest. Okay?
Folks, we're heading towards closure of this session. What we are going to do at this point is just remind you that we're offering some movement at this point for anyone who feels athletically inclined. And perhaps I'm just going to invite my brothers here to actually share with you what they're going to be offering during this next phase. So Doug, you're going to be doing a little exercise session, right?
I'm going to be doing some movement for people who want to play a little with the movement. We'll kind of do an easy warm-up, a couple minutes spurts of maybe some things that have spurts in them. Kind of focus it more towards fun and games that end up giving you a bit of activity, and we'll take it out on the street somewhere. Is there a park within a block or two of here? We'll probably just take it right out on the front lawn then. Rosie's gonna dance her way to health or something.
Actually, no, I'm going to, if anyone's interested who would like to move but doesn't want to do anything too exuberant, they just feel like a little bit of movement might be nice, just sort of loosening up the joints a little bit and so on and so forth, then I'm just going to be here right in this room, at the probably actually up here rather than getting in the way of the food back there. We can just clear a little space and have a little loosen up. So if you want to join me for that, please do. I know Art had a plot at foot as well, didn't you, Art?
Yeah, I'm going to do just a simple walk and talk over to the park that is close by. And I forget the name of it since I haven't been here for about a year and a half, but that's what I'll be doing. And maybe just 15 minutes walking toward there and 15 minutes back. And then we'll be here after a half hour.
Yeah, the whole idea is to take a half an hour to leave everybody still with 45 minutes for lunch.
And Robert?
I'm going to talk about basically postural re-education.
So that'll be practical. People can do it and move a little.
Even practical,
Yeah.
the movement patterns, the stress patterns that get locked in our body that cause us postural problems and low back, muscular skeletal problems. I'm going to talk a bit about the genesis of that stuff.
Supposed to be back here at a quarter of, and then. Oh, after. Okay. The session. Okay. The sessions end at a quarter of. These sessions are going to end at 1:45. Lunch will end at 2:30. We'll begin again with something. Yeah, with Q&A sessions, which will be kind of fun because all of us will be doing Q&A at the same time. So you can ask the same